Hello, Eileen.
Hello.
Hi, Anna.
It's like they'd be like halfway walk like that.
Hi, Phelan.
Hi, Miss.
So, tonight marks the beginning of the material that's going to be on your final exam. So your final exam is over chapters 21 through 25. So starting tonight, we're going to start going over those chapters. That being said, you're probably going to want to take really good notes. If for whatever reason I'm going too fast or you don't catch all that slide, stop me and let me know, especially for these chapters, so that you have that information. If you need me to repeat something I said, stop me and let me know, and I will gladly repeat it. I'm going to try and do a pretty good job of letting you guys know like the important stuff that you're definitely going to want to like put a star next to in your notes. But like I was telling Alba, I'm really, really tired. So I might forget to do that at some point. I'm going to try my best to remember everything that I need to tell you guys for your, well, I'm going to tell you everything, but I'm going to try and remind myself to tell you guys to put a little asterisk next to those parts. But in the off chance that I forget, make sure you take good notes. Remember, this is being recorded, so you can watch it back, but I'm sure that most people do not want to have to sit through this twice. So by all means, stop me and ask me to repeat myself or tell me to wait on slides. That being said, I did grade all of your individual presentations. Those of them that I got turned in, which I'm pretty sure everyone in here tonight, yeah, everyone turned theirs in. They were really good. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Hello.
Hey, Eric. So everyone that did their individual presentations, I think either got an A- or an A. So that was really, really good. Thank you for getting those into me on time and taken care of. And thank you, Selena, for what you did with yours. You did absolutely the correct thing. So what happened with Selena's is Canvas wouldn't accept hers, which I've had happen in the past several times. If in the off chance Canvas doesn't accept something, email it to me before the due date, and that will be fine, because I can just run it through Turnitin that way, which is fine, but preferably through Canvas. If Canvas won't accept it, then email it to me before the deadline. On another note, you guys do have one final big assignment. And does anyone know what that one final big assignment is? I'm sure one person in here does.
The gallery one?
Yes, your gallery review. So your gallery review is your last big assignment in this class. The other thing that you have is a discussion post, and that's only 15% of your grade, and then your final. Your gallery review is a paper that you need to write. Papers in college include introductions, body paragraphs, and conclusions. Some of you are like, well, duh, everyone knows that, you would think. But some people forget that papers, when written, should include an introduction, body paragraphs, and a conclusion always. Also, please do not plagiarize. If you use an outside source, cite it. Eric, question.
Yes, how many body paragraphs do we need? 1,
That
2,
is
or
up to
3?
you.
Thanks.
I will be going over your assignment at the end when hopefully, well, actually, I think pretty much everyone is in here that's going to show up. Yeah, everyone's here that's going to be here. The usuals. So I will go ahead and go over it now, which I'm sure you'd all prefer. Your gallery review, I'll just share this actually. That way everyone knows how to find it. Give me a second to get there. So it's under modules. And you would go down to your gallery review module and your guidelines and how it will be graded are in the exact same spot that you would submit it. So your guidelines are here. I will go ahead and pull that up and open it. And it's loading very slowly. Okay. Now let me share the screen. It seems my computer is as tired as I am tonight. So here are your gallery report guidelines. Once again, these are under the gallery report module on Canvas. Some guidelines to help you. For this gallery report, you do have to actually go to a gallery. I will name some galleries in a second. So guidelines, you do need to have your paper double spaced. You need to proofread it very, very carefully. Some of you might have caught on by now, some of you might not have. I am pretty picky when it comes to writing. So if for whatever reason you think you might be a weak writer, you might want to make an appointment with the Language Hub. Steps on how to make an appointment for the Language Hub can be found on the announcements page in Canvas. Or you can contact me and I can try and proofread it, but I do have like 150 students working on this paper at the same time. So if you wait too long to have me proofread it, I'm not going to have time to do it. If you want me to proofread it, you're going to need to get it to me early. So you do need to have it double spaced, proofread it very, very carefully several times. I'd read it out loud or have a friend read it. Needs to be 12-point font, a legible font, preferably Times New Romans, and at least 400 words. Good papers that I've read in the past are usually about 700. 400 is like the bare minimum. Those are not the best. That's the bare minimum. The best paper is usually about 2.5 pages, double spaced. I'll give you that heads up right now. So you do once again have to include an introduction and your part 1 of your paper, which usually ends up making your first body paragraph. But once again, that's up to you on how you want to do it. Identify the exhibit These are just guideline questions. You do not have to use these questions at all. You do not have to answer those questions. In fact, I don't really care if you do or not, but part 1 should be the overall gallery exhibit. So what is the theme of the show or the purpose of the show is a great thing to answer in your body paragraph. Of course, we are all smart writers, so you wouldn't actually in your paper say, was there any special purpose to the exhibit? The purpose is blah, blah, blah. You would write it fancily and not word for word. You would elaborate. Most gallery shows will have a theme, and that theme usually is very helpful for us to know, as well as the show's title. Answer if you think the art pieces worked well with the theme. Why not? Don't just tell me the walls were white. I've had that happen in the past. Most galleries are white. The walls are. That's pretty normal. Don't tell me there were spotlights. I know that. Most galleries have spotlights. Tell me about the actual show and the art pieces that you saw in it. Was it one artist on display? Were there multiple artists on display? Was there one art medium that was being focused on, or were there multiple art mediums being focused on? Let me know. Also, please don't tell me the address. I have had people, for their opening sentence of their introduction, give me the address. Please don't do that. It's just bad writing. Now, for part 2, which a lot of people in the past have made their second body paragraph, is there a question? I can't see, so you'll have to let me know. Questions? Anyone have a question about the introduction or the first body paragraph yet? Or I'm moving to the second one. No? Okay. So part 2 usually makes up the second body paragraph. You don't have to do that. It's up to you. But part 2 of your paper should be you selecting one art piece. Keyword one. So don't email me in 2 days asking me if you can write about more than one, because it's one. I say that because it's happened many times. And you're going to focus on that one art piece. Describe the art piece. Tell me who made it, what medium they used, what sort of principles of design they used, what process they used to make it. These are different questions that you can use to guide your writing. You do not have to use these questions. You do not have to answer these questions. Usually a really, really easy one that helps kind of make your paper more interesting is if I know why you chose that artwork, because usually there's a reason, and it kind of makes things more interesting for me to know that reason. Once again, you do need to include a conclusion after part 2. So you need an introduction, part 1, part 2, conclusion. That's how that works. Also, once again, if you use outside sources, you need to cite your sources. Now, any questions thus far?
So, like, what exhibit do we pick? Because, I mean,
That's
there's really no... Oh, okay. And then, like, that information about that exhibit itself, will we find it online, or do we get all that information from the actual place?
When you go. You can sometimes get the information online, but usually you'll get a little bit more when you go. Normally, when you walk into a gallery, there's a little panel on the wall that has a description about what that show is and the theme of it. Any other questions about that? The paper, not the places, because I'm about to show you different places you can go to. But about the paper. So one option for a free place that you could go for your gallery review is the Ellen Noel Art Museum. It usually has multiple gallery shows going on at the same time. So you can pick one of them usually the one that you like the most, and go for that one. It is free. It is located in Odessa on University Street. They're open every day except for Monday. So one option is their permanent collection gallery. They rotate this around using the museum's permanent collection. So the theme would be that it's the museum's permanent collection. There's not much of a theme beyond that. Part of their permanent collection is Stampede, which is a really famous artwork. Future exhibitions that are going to be popping up soon are Forests for the Trees by Michael Elm, which opens December 3rd, which doesn't help you guys actually. Let's see. So it looks like right now for the Ellen Noel Art Museum, the only exhibition that's really going on is their permanent collection. They're in the process of changing. Most shows are getting ready for Christmas right now, which is unfortunate since that is when you guys are not writing this paper, but that's just how it fell this year. They kind of moved stuff around because of COVID. Another museum that you could look at is the Museum of the Southwest here in Midland. That one does have a fee to enter it. But shows that are going on are Christmas at the Mansion, John Fleming Westland, let's see, we can get some ideas. So John Fleming Westland looks like he's a bit of an abstract artist. So the art show is going to be around the theme of him. It's a show about himself and his own artworks. And there is information, as you can see, on the website. There would also be information at the gallery itself. Another art show that's going on that's part of their permanent exhibition, which is usually really popular for people to go to, is the Turner Legacy Galleries. The Turner Legacy Galleries are based around family that exhibited, well, not really exhibited, they raced horses. It's about the Turner family. So it shows off their horse racing history. And once again, here's a little excerpt about the information, and they'd also have more information at the gallery itself. The Southwest Museum also has their Museum of the Southwest permanent collection on display right now. So this would be like the Ellen Noel's that constantly rotates. Other galleries that exist around here are the Petroleum Oil Museum, once again located in Odessa. The Petroleum Oil Museum does have an art show in an art gallery room that they put on, and they change out the exhibitions. UTPB also has an art gallery in Odessa, and Midland College does have an art gallery, but if you want to see that one, you're going to have to wait because we're in the process of changing out shows. We just had an art competition end, and we're getting ready for the student art show, which should be up in a couple of weeks. If you want to do an online gallery, reach out to me and I can give you some examples of ones you can use. Do not, I repeat, do not just look on your own, because you will end up finding things with the word gallery in the title, and it's actually with like 500 pieces of artwork, and I'm pretty sure you can't cover 500 pieces of artwork in 700 words. That would be way too hard. So reach out to me and I can find some online ones for you to check out. Reaching out to me would be emailing me, not saying I want to know right now because I'm going to forget by tomorrow. So yeah, but I can make you a comprehensive list of online exhibitions that you can view from your home if you'd be interested. And once again, if you want to know that, you need to email me soon-ish. Don't wait. Now, any other questions about your gallery review? That took up a lot of time, but it is your last big assignment. Eric, do you still have a question? Your hand's still up.
Yes, actually, I got two questions. If we do writing about the artwork, do we do more than one, right?
Just one.
And second one, does it include inappropriate ones?
I'm pretty sure all of the art shows that I just gave you an example of do not have any inappropriate artworks because it's West Texas.
Ah.
Yeah.
All right, good to know. All right, thanks.
Any other questions, guys?
For the gallery report, whenever we do that, because it's kind of an essay, do we have to put pictures on it, or is just all write it down?
Do not. You can if you want to, but you do not have to. If you do put pictures, you have to label those pictures appropriately, meaning follow the way your textbook labels pictures.
Okay, well, like I say, if I go like that southward and see that exposition about the Western, and I see one of the pictures and I can find it that they have it on online thing, so I can copy it out, and I have to label it out as like I see it on the exposition, like the name, year, name of the stuff, just like how I found it on the museum, I can put it on there.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Any other questions? Because these are pretty good questions. So keep it coming. Once again, usually a lot of your questions on how to do the paper can be answered if you just look at the gallery report guidelines. But if you do have a question that is not addressed in that guideline section, which can be found under the gallery report module in Canvas, then feel free to email me or ask me. This is not something you guys are going to want to procrastinate on too much because you're going to run out of time to perfect it, especially if you want to make an appointment with a language hub or have me proofread it. Do not procrastinate. I know we got people that like to wait for the last minute in here to do stuff. This is not the thing to do for this one. You will end up running out of time and not being able to get the help that you want. So that being said, my people that showed up late, we are starting chapters 21 through 25's material tonight. That is what's going to be on your final exam. So you're going to want to take really, really stinking good notes. Also, tonight is a longer night, so buckle up. So last we left off with Western art. We were in the Rococo period, which was an art style that occurred in France. Shortly after the Rococo period in the rest of Europe, the Industrial Revolution began. Does anyone remember what the Industrial Revolution is? Or what it's about? Kind of gives it away in the title. Yeah, I'm about to call on people.
Do none of you guys know this?
Well, what is usually, Alba?
Transition to a new manufacturing processes.
When in doubt, Google it. So the Industrial Revolution is when factories started being used. Things were being mass produced with machines. So instead of making things at home by hand, people are now using technologies to mass produce goods. So that's the first revolution that happens in the period of time considered to be the modern age. The second thing that happens that is also a revolution is the American Revolution, which I'm pretty sure you know about. If not, that's when America gains its independence. The American Revolution ends up inspiring the French revolutions. Well, the first one. The first French Revolution was about getting rid of the French monarchy. Those guys were really into the Rococo and frivolous lifestyles, and their people were starving to death. The French people ended up beheading a lot of the French aristocracy in the First Revolution. The Second Revolution happened well, not super long later. But eventually Napoleon's going to take over, and we're going to talk about all that tonight. Another thing that was happening in the modern age is the Enlightenment, or the age of reason, or transcendentalism, depending on which country you're talking about. So all of that is about using your rational and approach to think individually about different things. Transcendentalism itself is all about exploring thought and taking time to meditate and enjoy nature. So we're in an age when things are being mass produced, people are fighting for freedoms and liberties and what they believe in, and people are thinking for themselves. There's also a lot of stylistic pluralism. Specifically, we're talking about art when we get to that particular bullet point. In the art world, at this point in history, there are a whole bunch of different styles that pop up. One thing that's important to keep in mind about all of these different styles is that they were ruled by something called the Academy of Arts. The Academy of Arts set out guidelines that artists were supposed to follow. If artists did not follow those guidelines, they would be ostracized by the art world. And they're going to come up several times tonight in the lecture. So are the Transcendentalists and the Enlightenment people. Lastly, before we move on into actually looking about art, what's happening in this time period is that patronage has shifted. The last time we talked about who was paying for the art, it was the church and the church patrons trying to gain their way into heaven. Now, like I said, there is no longer a reliance on church beliefs and church dictating what can and can't be made and paying for what can and can't be made. Now it is the Academy of Arts that controls everything. And I made that sound extremely theatrical, and I don't really know why, but hey, whatever. Ooh, I went too far. Okay. So, like I said a second ago, there is stylistic pluralism when it comes to the arts. The first art style that was dictated all right to make by the Academy of Arts is Neoclassical. Neoclassical, or Neoclassicism, is an art style that heavily relies on Greek and Roman art influences. So they are copying the Greek and Roman idealism of the human figure that we looked at when we were looking at ancient Greek and Roman art. They're also playing on mythology, and they are using ancient Greek and Roman garb or clothing in their paintings, despite the fact that we're talking about the 1800s. So there's heavy, heavy influences and inspiration from the Greeks and the Romans with neoclassical art. You can easily see that with David's Oath of the Horatii, which is a story from Greek and Roman mythology that shows the virtue and readiness to die for liberty. This particular painting was very popular and appreciated during the French Revolution. We'll talk about why in a second. There's also an idealistic sculptural quality that's reminiscent to Greek and Roman sculptures in the way David has chosen to portray his people, which we see here. And I'm actually going to blow this up a little bit for you guys. So this is Jacques-Louis David's The Oath of the Horatii from the tail end of the 1700s. It's the tail end of the 1700s that neoclassical art kind of crops up, and it's really popular until like the mid 1800s. This is oil on canvas. And you can see here that they are obviously dressed in ancient Roman clothing. And this is a story from ancient Rome. So here in this story, we see three sons pledging their lives to Rome before their father. So they're about to go off to war, and they're pledging their lives for the freedom of Rome. And in the background, you see the women crying about their husbands who are about to go off and fight in this war. Once again, this was done around the time of the French Revolution, and this was a very inspirational painting for them. Why might this have been inspirational? Any guesses? Why would this have inspired people in the French Revolution?
They want to go to war.
Yeah, so the French Revolution was a war, and we're fighting for liberty. The Oath of the Horatii, these guys are pledging their souls to basically the Roman Republic. Republicanism, thanks to the American Revolution, was considered to be freedom or liberty, or a great example of that. So basically, this is representing what people were hoping to achieve. Micah, I'm gonna have to mute you. I'm getting really bad feedback for some reason tonight. Sorry, but thank you for answering. I appreciate that. So the whole painting is about liberty and achieving liberty, and the French Revolution, one of the main things of that war was them achieving liberty or freedom from the monarchy. And I do want to point out that in the background, these women were crying. There's a reason why these women are portrayed as soft and tender-hearted. That's because this is painted around the first wave of feminism and the beginnings of the first wave of feminism, when women are hoping to gain some sort of say in government and get better jobs and rights to jobs. So this is basically trying to, with women in particular, portray them as how the proper society would want women to be viewed, which is people that are supposed to be fragile and take care of the children, not the people that are supposed to go off and fight the war. Another great example of neoclassical art is Angelica Kauffman's Cornelia pointing to her children as her treasures. Angelica Kauffman is a rare example of a female artist. At this point in time, if you wanted to be an artist, you were required to go to an art academy. Remember, I said that it's the art academy that dictates the rules in the art community. So if you wanted to be a successful artist, you had to go through their schools. Angelica Kauffman was lucky enough to get into one of those schools, which never happened for women. She was not allowed to go to the same studies as the men, because the men did a lot of nude figure studies, and it wasn't considered appropriate for women to do that. So she didn't get the same opportunities in the school, but she was allowed to go to the school. And because of that, she was accepted into the art world, whereas a lot of other women artists were not. Her painting, Cornelia, pointing to her children as her treasures, is a neoclassical painting. Once again, it is a story from Roman mythology. These people are in Roman clothing. They have a sculptural Greek or Roman styling about them, and the architecture in the background is also Greek or Roman. Quite similar to David's Oath of Horatii that we just looked at. So here is that painting. You can tell the background has a classical style to it. All of these guys, despite this being painted once again at the tail end of the 1700s, are wearing ancient Roman or Greek clothing, and the story itself is Roman. So here you see Cornelia and her children and another woman off to the side. So as the story goes in the myth, a woman was showing off all of her precious jewels to Cornelia and saying, "Look at all of my beautiful treasures." And Cornelia said, "Well, my treasures are my children, not jewels." This is another great example of how people wanted women to behave in the late early 1800s. They're supposed to be homemakers raising children, not people trying to fight wars or gain power in government. Kaufman also was following that trend. But yeah, that's an ancient Roman story there. And our last example of neoclassical art is Thomas Jefferson's Monticello. Monticello is actually done in something called the Federal style. So I kind of mentioned a few weeks ago, which it's been a long time, that Andrea Palladio, Villa Rotunda, the house that was on a hill that every single side of the house was identical with a pediment, columns, and a dome on top. Andrea Palladio ended up writing a ton of architectural books telling people how to create a Romanesque style during the Renaissance period. Those books became bestsellers, and white males that went on something called a grand tour, which was what wealthy white men did. They would go around Europe and collect souvenirs from Europe, and then they'd go back home and start their business or whatever, or they'd go to college. But on their grand tour, they would often pick up one of Andrea Palladio's books on architecture. It was like the quintessential thing to pick up when you went to Italy as a souvenir. They would bring back Palladio's books to the United States. And Palladio's books being widely collected in the United States because of those grand tours became really popular, making his architectural style extremely popular. His architectural style became known as the Federal style because in the United States we used his textbooks on how to create a Romanesque building on all of our federal buildings, aka the Federal style. So the White House, Supreme Court, all of those buildings are done in the Federal style. And they are neoclassical, meaning they're inspired by Greek and Roman architecture. And a great example of that, once again, is Thomas Jefferson's Monticello. So here you can see it has a dome, which is Roman. A pediment on this door, a pediment on the porch area, Ionic columns, all of which are Greek. It has a frieze around the entire building, also Greek. There are steps leading up to the house, just like you would find on a Greek or Roman temple. Pretty much everything about this house, except for the lovely little wrapped balcony on top, are done in a classical architectural style, making this a great example of Romanesque, or not Romanesque, neo or new classical style. And if it is in the United States and it's neoclassical, then it's referred to as the Federalist style. And all of that's thanks to Andrea Palladio's book being really collectible in the Grand Tour. Now, our next style of art, because remember there's stylistic pluralism in this time period, meaning there's more than one style happening. Our next style is Romanticism. Romanticism was created as a reaction to Neoclassical art. People thought that Neoclassical art was a bit stuffy and didn't leave for individualism. So Romantic artists wanted the ability for more emotional expression. That's what Romanticism is all about. It's imagination, emotion, expressions, and it is not as stuffy and it's definitely not based on mythology like Neoclassical art. Romantic art itself sounds very romantic, but it's not at all. Romanticism was also a popular trend in this time period with literature. And just to give you an idea of a literary piece that probably everyone's read or heard of that falls under the romantic category, Frankenstein by Mary Shelley is a romantic piece of literature. It's not very romantic if you've ever read it. I mean, parts of it kind of are, but that gives you an idea that romantic art is not very romantic either. Romanticism itself is more about trying to express your thoughts and ideas on current events. So these artists were creating artworks as a reaction to current events that were happening and that they were playing witness to, such as Francisco Goya's The 3rd of May from 1808. We've talked about this one a few times in this class. He witnessed firsthand Napoleon's occupation of Spain, or attempted occupation of Spain. And he witnessed people being ripped out of their homes in the middle of the night and killed by a firing squad. And several years after witnessing the 3rd of May, 1808, he ended up painting what he'd witnessed in order to show his emotions or express his emotions to a large audience about what he'd witnessed. And here is the 3rd of May, 1808, which we remember, I'm sure. So here's Napoleon's firing squad and the innocent people that, well, they're supposedly like suspects that they are executing. We've talked about this one with focal points because all of the guns lead to this one man who's wearing a bright white shirt and holding his hands up like Christ on a cross because he is supposed to represent the innocent. And these guys are the non-innocents. So not very romantic in the sense of romance, but it is romantic in the sense that Goya was very preoccupied with that particular event that he'd witnessed, and he was expressing that. Another example of romantic art is the burning of the House of Lords and Commons by Turner. Turner witnessed the House of Lords and Commons on fire in London. That's basically like if our, I'm trying to think of the equivalent. Like if our House of Representatives building burned down, that would be what that is. So it's kind of a big deal. The main seat of government catching on fire and burning down. He decided to capture Parliament's burning, and then he painted it several months later as a way to express what he saw or what he witnessed. So it's another current event and him expressing it. For this painting, he does use very loose, expressive brush strokes. Thus far in painting history, when we've been looking at art history, we've been seeing very tight, precise, realistic brush strokes. Turner uses really, really loose, feathery brushstrokes, and this kind of will end up leading into Impressionism later on. And they're known for their loose brushstrokes. Turner's like one of the first artists to make use of that. Turner did modify the geography for this painting, and it's actually a part of a series. And if you ever go to London, it's in the British Museum of Art, I believe. This is one of them that's in the Cleveland, but like 6 of the series are in London, all in a room together. They're very large. So here you see that it looks like Parliament is actually right on the River Thames, when in fact it's not. It's a little bit off. So he changed the location in this painting of where Parliament actually is so that it could reflect the fire on the River Thames and make it look a bit ethereal and fantasy-like. The loose feathery brushstrokes also add to the beauty of the painting, even though it's not a beautiful event that we're watching. It's literally British government burning to the ground. And he also added the London Bridge in the background, and it's not located there at all. There's a bridge there, but it's not the London Bridge. And another example of Romanticism can be seen with American landscape paintings. American landscape paintings also fall under that genre of transcendentalism. I mentioned earlier that transcendentalism is the idea of really meditating and enjoying nature. So it comes about as a reaction, well, not really a reaction, but like part of the age of reason when people start thinking for themselves and coming up with their own thought processes. Transcendentalism is birthed from that. And transcendentalist art is all about nature. And America at this point in history is one of the few places in the world that still has untouched land. We are currently in this point in history, not today. In the 1800s, America is going through westward expansion. So there's a ton of untapped land that has never been painted and never been seen before. Europe didn't have that. Every inch of Europe had already been explored. So the idea of the unknown in America was very appealing to the masses and became a very popular subject matter for artists to paint, which is where we see a lot of American landscape paintings come from. And the reason why there's a ton of American landscape paintings, if you go to the Southwest Museum and their gallery, you're going to see a whole lot of American landscape paintings. So one really well-known American landscape painter is Thomas Cole. He paints the Oxbow as well as a lot of other landscape paintings, which is a really broad panoramic view that really captures the unknown as well as westward expansion. So with this composition, Cole has literally divided the picture plane in half. On the left-hand side, you see the untouched wilderness of America. It's bathed in a rain shower and darkness because it's the unknown still. And then on the right-hand side of the composition, you see farmland that has been pasteurized and cultivated around the Oxbow River. And in the background here, if we zoom in really, really close, you'll see that there's a train and a railroad. Basically a symbol of westward expansion is happening here. So you see westward expansion and America's glory and civilization. And then on the other half, America's nature and vast mystery. So Cole here was really ingenious with his compositional layout. Of course, with landscape paintings, artists would take a lot of artistic credit with their compositions, meaning that they will move things to match what they think will look best For example, the Oxbow River does not actually look exactly like this. Cole changed the river's shape to better fit his composition and make it look more appealing. That's a great example of that. Now, for all of these American landscape paintings, what would actually happen and how these artists made money is they would have shows back in the major cities, and they would have these paintings behind curtains. And in order to see the painting, you had to pay a quarter, and they'd open the curtain for a minute, and then they would close it. And that was how most of them made money. Now, why might these guys be afraid of photography? Why might landscape painters not be fans of photography?
Photography like captures things more accurately, and it's faster to do that method instead of painting.
Exactly. Photography is fast and it's way more realistic. The artists can't change the compositions. It shows things how they actually are. So landscape painters like Cole are very upset when photography is invented and brought over to the United States. Another American landscape painter is Robert S. Duncanson. And this is his probably most famous painting, Blue Hole, Little Miami River, which is located at the Cincinnati Art Museum. There's another example of his artwork at Crystal Bridges in Arkansas. But here you see men fishing. The men represent people moving westward in America, and they are surrounded by the wilderness of America and the beauty of America. And once again, Duncanson took artistic liberties with his composition for this one, which was pretty common for, well, all painters. And our last couple of examples of romantic art are Eugene Delacroix's The Death of Serendipolous, and then we'll look at another Eugene Delacroix in a second. Actually, not a Eugene Delacroix. So this is based off of a play by Lord Byron. Lord Byron was another romantic literary, I'm trying to think of the word. Yeah, you get it. He's really well known for his romantic literature. And this painting is about the title character, Serendipolous, who decides that he is going to take poison and kill himself, but he wants to watch all of his favorite things being destroyed while he dies or before he dies. So he doesn't want any of his favorite stuff to exist after him. And this painting is a response to Delacroix reading or watching that play and experiencing the horrifying event of watching all of these precious objects and things being destroyed. It does have a very Baroque styling to it. Remember, Baroque is very ostentatious and extravagant. It does recall that stylistic painting. You can tell it's very extravagant. There's a whole lot of stuff going on, just like with the Baroque paintings. Think back to Peter Paul Rubens' The Raising of the Cross, which had a ton of stuff going on in the composition. Same thing with Eugene Delacroix's The Death of Serendipolous. Here is Serendipolous up there on his throne, and he's watching all of his things being destroyed. His horses are being killed. His wives are being slaughtered in front of him. All of his possessions are being broken before he goes and commits suicide. And once again, this is just an expressive reaction to witnessing that play. Pretty over the top and dramatic. And a lot of romantic art is very dramatic. We've already looked at Goya's 3rd of May. which is a dramatization of Napoleon's invasion. We're also going to look at the Raft of the Medusa again, which we've already looked at before, by Theodore Géricault, which is a very exaggerated interpretation of a news story that he read about. He read about the ship Medusa hitting a storm and sinking, and the passengers and crew on the ship tried for quite a long period of time to be rescued, and most of them ended up starving to death, and the survivors ended up having to resort to cannibalism to live. This is a very dramatic interpretation of that event. Not the event wasn't dramatic, but of course Géricault wasn't there to witness it. This is just what he thinks it looks like. And now we are going to talk about photography, which does put several landscape artists out of business. As Brucke mentioned, photography is very realistic. Early photography is quite cumbersome, and the particular chemicals used to create photographs early on are very toxic. Not that there aren't chemicals that are toxic used today in photography, there are, but they aren't quite as bad. And of course, develop time was quite, or exposure time was pretty lengthy to begin with. However, later on, those are all things that have been fixed or improved upon. Like I said, photography is realistic and can capture landscapes a lot faster, easier, and are a lot more believable than those landscape paintings that we looked at, such as Timothy O'Sullivan's Iceberg Canyon, which we see here. Great example of landscape photography. So we're still continuing on with celebrating America's westward expansion here. Just now we're using new technology to do so. Photography was also used to take pictures of people. We're going to look at Nader's photograph of Sarah Bernhardt in a second. So that makes a big difference from, let's say, Delacroix trying to realistically show a human in a painting. Now we can take a picture of a person and actually show what they really look like. Of course, nowadays you can Photoshop it, so it's not super realistic anymore. But this is obviously a lot more realistic image of a human figure than Delacroix's figures of the Raft of the Medusa, which were very exaggerated. So photography brings with it an idea and an acceptance of more realistic looking images. Speaking of realism, so I've mentioned several times that the Art Academy set forward different formulas and rules that artists were expected to follow. All artists would usually go to the Art Academy and learn how to make art based on their rules. If you refuse to follow their rules, you usually would not be a very successful artist. That being said, an unpopular genre of art that came about in the 1800s was realism. Realism not only shows things how they actually appear, but its main topic is everyday life. The Art Academy and salons that are exhibiting artworks did not want to show everyday life in their galleries. They wanted to show mythology, exaggerated stories, romantic art. landscape paintings that make things look majestic and mysterious, not people doing road work, which is one painting that we're about to look at in a second that falls under the category of realism. So realism was not a well-accepted genre by the Academy. And a gallery used to be called a salon. So if you wanted to make money in the art world, you would show your artworks in these salons. Today's art galleries are quite a bit different from the old-time salon. Today's galleries, you'll walk in and there might be like 20 pieces of artwork. They'll all be spaced out to give you time to look at them and not get overtaken by other art pieces or have a sensory overload. The old-time salon would have artworks displayed from the ceiling to the floor, from wall to wall. There would be no blank space on the walls. So if you wanted to capture people's attention, you had to be either a really well-known artist that critics have been declaring is amazing and a genius, or you'd have to do something really large and eye-catching, or you can do what realism artists did and break the rules. That would usually get people's attention really easily. So like I said, most acceptable art falls under, as far as like art academy or academic art, will be neoclassical or romantic. But realism is an ordinary style that does not idealize anything. It does not make anything seem mysterious. There is no nostalgia or mythology included with it. It is just literally, for example, Gustave Courbet's an ordinary road worker. People don't want to pay to go to an art school to see pictures of people doing roads construction. That's just not things people want to see. So Gustave Courbet creates the painting called The Stonebreakers. He does make it very, very large in comparison to most other artworks shown in a salon. And his artwork does not fall under the neoclassical style or the romantic style. It is out of pocket and it is not well accepted. It literally shows people working on a road. There's no dramatization, there's no idealism, there's no mythology. It's just two guys breaking up some stones in order to pave a road. Gustave Courbet did another painting that some of you might have come across when you were doing your censorship section. He did some pretty off-the-wall paintings. This one was destroyed during World War II in some bombings in Germany, so it no longer exists today. Unfortunately, we just have a reproduction and some photographs. But you can see realism clearly doesn't idealize anything. It shows things how they actually are, and it shows real life with real people. And the Salon and the Academy do not like it. After this, Gustave Courbet is not allowed to show at salons. He eventually just opens up his own gallery and shows his artworks there. So some of the critics' reactions to the Stonebreakers painting, critics said it was raising a cult of ugliness in art. So critics were worried that it was going to spur on other artists to create ugly artwork like this. They said it was socialism or a socialism piece. This is starting to be the time period when Karl Marx's writings on socialism start popping up that go against democracy and people don't like them. And like I said, he eventually has to start his own exhibitions because he's not allowed to show in salons anymore, at least not salons run by the Art Academy. This oil painting was done outdoors, meaning Courbet was sitting outside watching these guys do this and painting them while they were doing that. He is the first artist to paint outdoors. This is called painting en plein air. is the French term for it, which just means painting outside. The only reason why he's able to do this is because oil paints are now available in tubes, ready-made to purchase. So he's able to take his tubes of paint and paint outside. Prior to this, if you wanted oil paint, you had to grind up the pigments yourself and make them yourself. Now they are ready-made and portable. This allows artists to capture their first impressions of things, which I'm sure if you're catching on, you'll know where I'm going. Another example of realism is The Horse Fair by Rosa Bonheur. This is another female artist. She was not taught at the Art Academy. She was not allowed to show at Art Academy salons. In fact, she broke a lot of rules. The horse fairs were basically auctions where you could purchase horses. Those are auctions that women were not allowed to go to, and Rosa is clearly a woman. I'm pretty sure you can tell by the name. So in order to go to those horse fairs, since it was illegal for women to go, she would dress in men's clothing, which is also illegal for women to do at this time. She was thrown in jail several times for it and fined many times for it, but she kept going back because she really liked to paint horses. And here is the horse fair. You can see it's just a parade of the horses around the rings, and then they will bring the horses up individually one by one to show them off to people for purchase. There's actually a self-portrait of Rosa right here. She is looking directly at us in men's clothing because once again, she had to wear a disguise to go to the horse fair. And like I said, it's a realism piece. This is something that happened all the time. It was pretty average for people to see. There's no idealism going on at all. Another example of realism is, actually, I'll just show you the art pieces first, is Thomas Eakins' William Rush carving his allegorical figure. So this is our realism piece. He was trained by, a lot of back and forth, by Jean-Léon Gérôme. Jean-Léon Gérôme was a member of the Art Academy. He paints something called Pygmalion in Galatia. That's his most well-known painting, which is a story from mythology. It is a neoclassical piece. It does follow the academic art rules. And here is that piece there. So he is wearing Roman garb. You see the mythological Cupid in the background. This is a story in which the sculpture comes to life, and the artist who is sculpting her loved his sculpture so much that he was able to bring her to life, and they became lovers. And they lived happily ever after, which is why there's a Cupid in the background. So once again, Jean-Léon Gérôme ended up training Thomas Eakins, who does a painting very similar to the Pygmalion one that we just saw. However, he did not idealize anything. So here we see another nude female. However, this one does not have an idealized figure. We see all of her lumps and bumps on her. It is not an idealized body. These guys are not dressed in neoclassical clothing at all. They're in regular clothes for that time period. The brushwork is very loose. It's not realistic. It's not smooth. It's not as enjoyable to look at as far as what the art critics thought. So Thomas Eakins was also not accepted into the salons, and he broke the Academy rules. People were shocked by this painting because the model was not shown beautifully perfect. But it does fall under the category of realism because she isn't idealized. There's no mythology. There's no exotic. There's nothing like that in this painting. And our last example of realism is Tanner's The Banjo Lesson, which is quite a bit different. So Henry Asawa Tanner is one of the first African artists that we've talked about in a while. So what he would do is he would try to kind of like it says here, dignify Black or African lifestyles and elevate them into being accepted by the art community. Unfortunately, Tanner was facing two issues there. First off, he was an African American man trying to gain acceptance in a primarily white male field. So that was issue number one. Issue number two is his art style was realism, which we've already talked about breaks the Art Academy's rules and isn't accepted by them. So in this is just a realistic depiction of a grandfather teaching his grandson how to play the banjo in a house. This is an everyday, average, realistic depiction of African American life. And I guess we do have one more realism piece, and that gives our way into Impressionism. We have Edward Manet's Luncheon on the Grass. Edward Manet is known as the father of Impressionism. Impressionism is probably the most famous or popular art style to come about in the last few hundred years, and he is known as the father of it. Here's where it gets tricky. There is an Edward Manet, and then there is a Monet, both of which fall under Impressionism in some sense. So Edward Manet is the father of Impressionism. He does realism. That's the art style that he does. So once again, he is not well accepted into the Art Academy. He did study at the Art Academy. He knows all of the rules. He knows how to paint. He just chooses to go against all of the rules. He ends up being kicked out of the Art Academy salons. He buys his own gallery space, just like Gustave Courbet did, and exhibits his works there. He purposefully shocks his viewers. We've talked about an Edward Manet work before, the Olympia painting with the reclining nude. It's been a long time since we've talked about it. But that is an Edward Manet. But like I said, he purposefully shocks his viewers. So Luncheon on the Grass made people very angry. We'll talk about why as we break it down. Here is Luncheon on the Grass. First off, the big one that made people mad is that the women are naked and the men are clothed. Why? No one knows. It's not mythological. There's nothing that makes sense there that has to do with mythology. So these women should not be naked as far as the salon is concerned. Secondly, there are pieces of this canvas that are not painted, especially in the background areas. He exhibited this at the salon like it was finished, even though there were areas that were not painted. That's a big no-no in the art world. You usually would never show something that's unfinished unless you died. Otherwise, it should be finished before you exhibit it. Next off, if we really get super particular, a lot of the shadows in the background in the trees would be incorrect. There's also areas that are extremely flat and two-dimensional, even though Manet knew how to make things look realistic, he just chose not to. And the big one, this lady in the background is way too big for where she's supposed to be proportionally. Her ratio is off. Once again, Manet knew how to show correct proportions. He just chose to show incorrect proportions. Like I said, he liked to shock people. These guys are not idealized at all. Nobody in this image is. It was very upsetting to viewers. People called it ugly, shocking, rude, disgusting. It was not well accepted by the salon. Of course, today we're like, what? This is not a big deal, but yeah, that's today. But like I said, he is the father of Impressionism, which leads us into Impressionism. Impressionism was formed in Impressionism is actually a group of artists that was formed in 1873. There's a specific group of people that are members. And Manet, this guy, did exhibit with the Impressionists for a short period. The Impressionists were a group of artists that were not allowed to exhibit at the Art Academy salon. So they made their own art shows. The reason why they were not allowed to show at the Academy salons is because they didn't fall under Realism, they didn't fall under Neoclassical, and they didn't fall under Romantic. They were just their own weird new thing, and people didn't like it. Impressionism is all based around first impressions of what you actually see. So painting very quickly, very rapidly with loose, broad, thick brush strokes. This is where that word impasto painting comes about. These are the first guys to use impasto painting. Impasto painting is when you use very thick paints in like a batter-like consistency. And the reason why Impressionists are given the name Impressionism is because of Claude Monet. Please don't confuse him with Manet. I know, there's very close. It's close. Edward Manet is the father. Edward Monet is the reason why they get the name Impressionists, which was supposed to be derogatory, but they kind of embraced it. So Claude Monet ends up painting something called Impression Sunrise, which is how they get their name, and we'll look at it in a second. But to give you an idea of what the Impressionist artists did, here is Monet's Arrival of the Normandy train. So this was painted while he was watching this train come into the station, really fast, first impression, outside in that location. He didn't like sketch it out and then go back to his studio, which is kind of a new thing for artists in this time period. And once again, that's thanks to the fact that oil paints are now in tubes. Now, like I said, the big reason why Impressionists are given the name Impressionists are because of Claude Monet's painting Impressions Sunrise. He was literally titling it that because it was his first impression of what he saw that sunrise to look like that day. And like I said, it was supposed to be a derogatory term. However, the artists felt it very fitting and they accepted it and they liked it and they ran with it. So in this painting, you'll see very small dabs of color, broad brush strokes. They aren't blended together to make it look perfect or idealized. It's more about the experience of the color and the vibrancy and the first impression. And here is that painting now. You can see he didn't bother to blend in these brush strokes at all. He didn't try to make it look realistic. He was just painting his first impression. Another Impressionist artist is Auguste Renoir. Auguste Renoir is really well known for his paintings of middle-class society enjoying everyday life. We already know the Academy doesn't like everyday life paintings. They definitely don't like paintings of the middle class, so that isn't really well accepted. But Renoir is very interested in human dynamics, humans interacting with other humans, and how to portray light and shadow and things like that. And here is Les Moulins de la Galette, which literally translates to the pancake house. This is a painting of a pancake house. No. So usually for the middle class, a popular Sunday afternoon activity would be to go to these restaurants that had dance halls outside. So the families would be eating pancakes, which are not like American pancakes. It's more like crepes, and enjoying their Sunday afternoon and dancing in the background and just enjoying each other's company. And of course, just like Claude Monet, Auguste Renoir would go to these settings and paint them while he was sitting there watching these things happen, painting his first impressions. Edward Degas did things a little bit different. Degas would actually do sketches and then go back to his studio, so he was quite a bit different in terms of the Impressionists. He was pretty much the only one that did this, and he would do little studies and make his compositions like a normal artist. He would do sketches, preliminary sketches, go back to the studio and create an interesting composition. And Degas is most well known for painting ballerinas. He did not glamorize the ballerinas. In fact, ballerinas were considered to be low class, not much better than a prostitute. We'll talk about why in a second. And here is one of Edward Degas' paintings. So once again, he would have done studies and sketches and then gone back to his studio and created this composition. So the reason why ballerinas would not be an acceptable thing to paint is because at this period in time, we're talking about Victorian society, the society that women couldn't even show their ankles or their wrists. It was considered inappropriate. And here you see young unmarried women with short skirts and nothing hiding their bare legs. And that's literally her underwear or her pantaloons poking out underneath. So what would happen at these ballet classes is creepy old men, like this fellow here, would go and watch these young women dance so that they could check them out and peer up their skirts while they were dancing. So ballerinas were not considered reputable for young women to like be a ballerina back then, just because of the creepy old men being super gross. But yeah, Edward Degas would paint paintings of that. So maybe he was a creepy old man too, who knows? And then our last Impressionist artist is Mary Cassatt. So your Impressionist artist group, it was a very specific group of artists, consisted of Edward Manet, who only exhibited a couple of times with them, Claude Monet, Auguste Renoir, Edward Degas, and Mary Cassatt. Nobody else. That's it, just them. Mary Cassatt is the only female in the group, and she is the only American in the Impressionist group. She's from Philadelphia. She becomes really good friends with Manet and Degas when she goes to Paris, and she picks up their painting style and starts painting her first impressions of things. Normally, her paintings have to do with motherhood, just because she is a woman and a mom, and that was just a popular subject matter for her. That was what she preferred to paint. So a lot of her content is very feminine in that nature. So here you see a mom and a young boy on a boat outing. This man here is the one that they paid to take them out on the lake for a row. Women weren't supposed to row themselves. And then on the other end of the boat, which we can't see, would have been Cassatt sitting there and painting them. So she painted them while they were on their boating. So the Impressionist group actually disbanded in 1886 after their 8th exhibition, and they did not show again after that. That was it. Very short-lived group of specific people. Auguste Rodin is not an Impressionist artist. He is not. However, he does create sculptures that are similar in style to the Impressionist painters. He is not an Impressionist. He just makes stuff that looks kind of like the Impressionists. He's actually a predecessor to them, meaning he comes before them. He was very inspired by Michelangelo's unfinished artworks, so his Awakening Slaves sculptures that he did never get to finish because he died. Those guys were super rough and not idealized because they weren't finished by Michelangelo. Rodin did a lot of bronze statues, plaster, and clay statues as well. So he is a sculptor. His most well-known statue is a bronze statue titled The Thinker, which you see here. So it's not an idealized form at all. He looks like he is in serious thought. His body has wrinkles and signs of worry and wear with it. I also find it very interesting. All of Auguste Rodin's statues have really large hands and feet. That's like one of the things that you can usually tell it's a Rodin is if they have really, really large feet and hands. But yeah, once again, very inspired by Michelangelo's unfinished pieces, not an Impressionist artist, but does sculptures similar to the Impressionists. There were no sculptors in the Impressionist group. And I say that a gajillion times, and still on the test, somebody's going to say Auguste Rodin was an Impressionist artist, even though he's not. Because the Impressionists were a very specific group of artists that showed works in the Impression galleries together. And they were all paintings. Okay, now we're getting towards the end of this section, and then we can take a break, which would be lovely at this point. Following the Impressionist group disbandment comes the period of Post-Impressionism. Post-Impressionism artworks are a reaction to Impressionism. There is not a single style that's shared with Post-Impressionism. It's just literally a period of art of like a bunch of jumble of different things, such as the artist George Seurat. George Seurat comes up with his own art style as a reaction to Impressionism called Divisionism or Pointillism. Seurat tried to do Impressionism. He tried to get in on that group, but he didn't ever quite make it. And he ended up just deciding to come up with his own thing called Pointillism. Pointillism uses optical color mixture, which was a study that came out when he was working on trying to be an Impressionism and failing at it, in which if you put two different colors next to each other, they will optically, in our eyes, mix and make a new color. So let's say if you put a really teeny tiny dot of yellow right next to a really, really teeny tiny dot of blue, in our eyes from far away, we will see green. That's what optical color mixture is. And his most well-known painting using Pointillism or Divisionism is The Sunday Afternoon on La Grande Jatte. So another reason why Seurat probably wouldn't cut it as an Impressionist is because he was very technical and scientific minded, and the Impressionists were like spur of the moment kind of people. Seurat would go to the same park every single day for several months, drawing people in it. And Sunday Afternoon on La Grande Jatte is a culmination of all of his drawings put together. So it is not a first impression. It is a specifically made composition of a whole bunch of different studies. And it doesn't look like there's a whole bunch of different polka dots here, but there's a whole bunch of different polka dots here. And we're actually going to look at this man in the tank top very closely. I guess not now. Okay, hang on. Let me find a picture of that so you can really grasp Pointillism. Because I feel like if you don't really get a good close-up, you can't really grasp Pointillism. Let's see. So here you can see on the close-up of that man's face from the painting, just how optical color illusions work. So literally this entire painting is just a combination of different polka dots of color done very small and meticulously. And then from far away, it blends together and makes the colors that we see on the painting. But here you can see the grass, the man's hair, his face, his eyes, his mustache. And then from far away, you get this painting here. So this is actually a rather large painting. If you ever get the opportunity to see it in person, you will definitely be able to pick out the different polka dots of color very easily. And it's pretty entertaining to watch. Another artist that created artworks as a means of reacting against Impressionism is Paul Cézanne. Paul Cézanne ends up becoming really, really important to artists like Van Gogh, that we'll be talking about in a second. Cézanne tried his hand at Impressionism as well, but he ended up kind of doing his own little thing, just like Seurat did, just in a different way. He ended up using way larger brush strokes than the Impressionists did, but he did paint outside, and he did paint his first impressions of things. So here you can see his painting of Mount Saint Victory, which was actually in his backyard. So he'd literally go sit out in his backyard and paint this mountain over and over and over again. And you can see the trees. There's actually a town here at the foot of the mountain. And you can see he probably used a very large brush or a spatula to paint this. It is in also an impasto technique painting style. And he's going to become very influential for Cubism later on, which you can kind of probably make out why, especially in the buildings. Another reaction to Impressionism is Expressionism. If you haven't caught on, almost all of these end in ISM. That's because we're in the time period of the isms. Yay. That happens around the 1800s. All of the art styles end in ISM for some reason. Art historians figured out that was a great way to have a theme, I guess. I don't know. So we're on to Expressionism. Expressionism was a way for artists to emotionally express colors and bold brushstrokes. There's different kinds of Expressionism that we're going to be talking about in this class specifically tonight. But the first style of Expressionism to pop around is about color. And our example of an Expressionist artist is Vincent van Gogh. Everyone knows Van Gogh's Starry Night. We will look at it in a second. But Van Gogh is also heavily influenced by Japanese prints that were being imported at this period in time, which you can see here, that influence. This isn't real Japanese writing. He made up words that looked kind of like calligraphy. But in a lot of Japanese prints, what they would do is they'd have a random tree in the middle of the foreground, kind of blocking out the midground and background. So Van Gogh copied that idea here onto his painting. And of course, Van Gogh also used that here with the sower, once again, a tree in the foreground, kind of blocking your image or your view, which carries over from Japanese prints. And then obviously the Starry Night is Van Gogh's most famous image. And I'm kind of tired of Starry Night right now. My morning classes, for some reason, they just had to do like a short essay the other day. And I swear like 25 of them wrote about this. And I don't know why, because we haven't talked about it in class. It's an okay painting. I don't think it's great enough for half my class to write about, but okay. So here, once again, you see a tree blocking your view onto a good portion of the landscape. This tree is a cypress tree. This is actually a painting that Van Gogh did while he was in an asylum. Van Gogh had tried to commit suicide, so his brother checked him into a mental asylum. And this is his view out the window. He omitted the bars on the windows for this painting because he, I guess, didn't think they'd look great. But your cypress tree actually symbolizes death. And then, of course, the sky is the heavens. And then your church spire actually echoes that cypress tree there. And of course, once again, very loose, flowy brush strokes, harkening back to Impressionism. And our other Expressionist artist besides Van Gogh that we're going to talk about is Paul Gauguin. Van Gogh and Gauguin were best friends, literally best friends. They were pen pals. They wrote at each other and told each other everything. They were both inspired by the same things. So Paul Gauguin is also really inspired by Japan and Japanese prints. He's also really inspired by Impressionism. And Paul Gauguin really is obsessed with exoticism. So exotic things, things that are not European. So he actually likes to go to non-European places to create his painting. Paul Gauguin was actually a stockbroker. He married into a wealthy family, and his stepfather, father-in-law, got him a really cush job as a stockbroker. Paul Gauguin gave up that job to be a painter, and he left his wife and his daughter in order to paint, like literally abandoned them. He just disappeared one day and said, "I'm not coming back." So not the great father figure, but I guess he's a pretty good painter. He's in every art history textbook. So we are going to first look at his vision after the sermon, which depicts a Brittany colony. Brittany colonies were very obsessed with like Puritanism and the Bible, which was exotic to Paul Gauguin, who was not from an area like that. He was from the city. So seeing people living the Puritan lifestyle in the late 1800s was pretty interesting for him. So this is the vision after the sermon, Jacob wrestling the angel. So these are the people that have just gotten out of their Sunday sermon on Brittany. And of course, you see the tree blocking the view, just like Van Gogh's interpretation of Japanese prints. And in the background, you see the biblical story of Jacob wrestling an angel, which literally does happen in the Bible. He ends up breaking like a rib or an arm or something. But yeah, and that's his interpretation of that. Of course, this is a biblical story. This is the people of Brittany. These things didn't occur together. This is a composition that Gauguin came up with after watching and observing these people. Gauguin also ended up, like I said, leaving his family. He ends up moving to Tahiti permanently, and he gets a new wife there and starts a new life. For Gauguin, Tahiti was like the epitome of the exotic. They had different gods and goddesses and believed in the spirit realm and dreams and things like that. So very non-Western. And he takes a lot of those symbols and, like it says down here, the language of dreams, so studying the meaning of dreams, and he applies that to his artworks. So here you see one of the Tahitian gods being portrayed, and then the Tahitian people. And down in the river, something interesting is happening. So we see very vibrant, bright colors being used. Same with kind of on the landscape here. This will become inspirational to the Fauve artists that we're going to talk about after our break. Fauves are known for their bright uses of colors. But Gauguin here is trying to interpret those dreams by using different colors and kind of making it look like it's a fantasy or a dream world. So this whole painting here is supposed to symbolize the exotic or the non-Western environment that he's living in. Speaking of symbolism, that's another thing that pops up in this time period. Symbolism uses decoration, decorative forms and symbols to try to give other meanings to things, like using the Tahitian god here and the symbol of the language of dreams. Why Henry Toulouse-Lautrec is under here, I don't know. I mean, I kind of get it, but it's a bit of a stretch. Henry Toulouse-Lautrec is a printmaking artist from Paris. He's part of the Art Nouveau movement, and his artworks are all based around making posters for places like the Moulin Rouge. So Toulouse-Lautrec did use really interesting cropping and angles for all of his paintings and his prints. As you can kind of see here, this woman's face is cut off. She's given a ghostly, ghastly appearance to show off the nightlife of the theater. And most women that are attending places like the Moulin Rouge are heavily painted, and they don't want to be noticed. They're trying to wear masks. Unfortunately, in the background, if you were part of Parisian society, you would recognize every single one of these figures. Of course, today you cannot. But if you were part of Parisian society back in the 1800s, you would recognize who every single one of these figures are. For example, right here is Henry Toulouse-Lautrec. And if you were at a place like the Moulin Rouge, which is not a reputable establishment in Paris, you would not want to be recognized. However, these guys are all recognizable. They're supposed to be wearing their mask, but they aren't. And that takes us to Art Nouveau. Like I said, Toulouse-Lautrec is part of the Art Nouveau movement. It's supposed to be a new art style that comes about in Paris. It's all about architecture, interior design, and advertising using abstract, organic, natural forms. So things that look like they should be found in nature, but they aren't really. They're very graceful, such as Victor Horta's stairwell in the Tassel House. You can see all of the organic columns and the decorative motifs. So Art Nouveau is a very decorative style. And moving on to our last bit of post-impressionism with Edvard Munch's The Scream. So the Scream is a very popular art image, and it is a great example of something called German Expressionism. Like I said, there'd be more than one Expressionism tonight. This is early German Expressionism. Early German Expressionism is all about angst, or expressing the physical emotion or the overabundance of physical emotions that you're experiencing. A lot of German art is about emotions and too many emotions to contain. And Edvard Munch's The Scream is a great example of that. Edvard Munch's The Scream is also very avant-garde. Avant-garde means front line. It's originally a military term for the front guard or the front line of a military like army. But in the art world, it just means art that it's at the forefront of new trends. And Munch's The Scream does definitely fit that. Here is that painting there, which I'm pretty sure everyone has seen. So the story is that Edvard Munch witnessed a close friend pass away in a bedroom from an illness, and he became so overcome with emotions that he couldn't contain himself. He ran out of the room and screamed on the pier. So the pier, and then you see the little lake in the background. So this is actually a self-portrait of the emotions. And you can really see the emotional turmoil that was going on in his mind. I'm sure if you've ever experienced losing someone close to you, you would understand that sometimes your brain just can't comprehend what's going on. And that is what Munch was trying to portray here with the Scream painting. And I know that was a whole lot of information, but we're not done. So we made it through modern art, modernism, with romantic, neoclassical, realism, impressionism, and all of the post-impressionism pieces. Now we are going to be moving into some more prominent art movements similar to like what impressionism is. So groups of artists that are working together in the same styles and in the same areas. They also end in ISM, sorry. But each group has their own specific style and trend that they're working with. But before we do that, I do want to give us a little bit of a short break. Like I said, tonight is a bit of a longer night. We'll see how far we make it in this next one before I just give up because I am so tired. But yeah, so I will give you guys a, let's say we be back here at 7:18. That gives you guys 6 minutes for a break. So get a drink, go to the restroom, take care of your business, and come back here at 7:18. So you guys have 1 minute left on your break. And we are back. Before we move on to this next section, which isn't nearly as long as the last one we just did, so that's good news. Does anyone have questions about anything that we've gone over tonight so far? No? Okay. All right then. Let's go ahead and get started with part 2 of the evening. So now we're on to chapter 22's materials. So at this point in time, thanks to artists like Courbet and Manet and the Impressionists coming about, academic art has really become a thing of the past. Artists are allowed to really express themselves more freely. There's also a lot of changing views with information that the public can consume, such as psychology with the works of Freud and Jung, technology like the airplane that was created by the Wright brothers, as well as automobiles and planes are coming about in this time. Well, planes and trains, sorry, coming about, and a lot of scientific breakthroughs like those by Marie Curie and Einstein. So times are changing and art changes with that. Oftentimes art is a reaction to the environment in which the artists are living. Other things, the Industrial Revolution is continuing. This is like the second wave of the Industrial Revolution. And some of the impacts of that is that the middle class is now making more money and have a longer life expectancy. There's a little bit less class tension thanks to the revolutions that already took place. And artists are inspired by all of these different things that are happening in the world around them. This is like the honeymoon phase for art right before World War I and World War II happened. That's pretty much what we're talking about right now. That time period, that cushion time period right before World War I. So some of the characteristics of 20th century art, so we're talking about the 1900s or early 1900s, because we're going to get into art made in World War I and World War II next week, are rapid, fast changing trends. In fact, speed is a common theme in 20th century art, which we'll get to towards the end of this lecture. Diversity with art. So not like today with the word diversity, we think of like racial inclusion. Unfortunately, that is still trying to take place today. The art world is quite a bit behind when it comes to inclusion. So we're talking about diversity as far as the fact that there's not rules set forward by a school of art or by a church. Now artists are allowed to express their individuality and explore different techniques and themes. And you definitely see a really big exploration taking place with our first group of artists for this chapter, which are the Fauves, or their nickname, the wild beasts. So Fauve artists really overturn any sense of authority or rules with art, and it's purely about artistic expression. This group of artists was very interested in colors and how they could boldly use colors to create expressive pieces of art. And the leader of the Fauves, or the beasts, is Henri Matisse. Henri Matisse is very well known for creating super flat looking paintings, so very two-dimensional looking paintings. He knows how to make things look three-dimensional. He just chooses not to. This is how he chooses to express himself. He's also known for painting with very bold color choices. So for example, here there's actually a table, but the table ends up becoming the wall in the background. There's no real true delineation between the two. The seat looks like it's kind of like floating the way that it is positioned on the chair. The background, it's hard to differentiate whether it's a window or a painting. It's actually supposed to be a window. The tableware looks like it would just slide off of the table. So that is what we are at with art. This is the time period of art where people start not liking art in this class, but hopefully we can, as we go through this, start to gain a little bit of an appreciation of it. So the Fauves were a small group of people that didn't last too long, that, like I said, they like to use bright colors to express themselves. They aren't interested in showing things realistically. They're interested in showing things in the manner that they found appropriate as far as expressing their emotions at that period of time. So they're called les Fauves, or the Fauves, meaning the wild beasts. And they're called the wild beasts because of their color choices, because their color choices don't really make sense, because their paintings don't really make sense. Like I said, Matisse is the leader. Matisse's paintings are once again very expressive. He takes a lot of time and thought when he's making his paintings and his compositions. It looks like he does them very quickly, but he is not. He is taking a lot of time, several years usually, to compose his images and paint them the way he's trying to envision them in his mind. So once again, this is the time period in art where people are very individual in creating their artworks. His most well-known artwork is The Joy of Life, which is intentionally childlike. So he intentionally made it look like a child could paint it, even though he's not a child. He went to art school to learn how to paint. And here is that painting. You can see it took him quite a bit of time to come up with this composition and how he wanted it to be painted. And you can also see the wild color choices being portrayed here. The tree trunk is green, the tree leaves were orange, the sky is pink, the grass is yellow, people are yellow and blue and pink. He's chosen bold color choices for a reason, because he's part of the Fauvist style, and he's using those colors to express his emotion. His emotion at the time was trying to depict the joys of life. And in the Joy of Life painting, you see a celebration of music, art, love, dance, all of the above. So in the background, you can easily see dance being portrayed as a joy experienced in life. Over here, you can see a boy playing a flute with goats nearby. That's a play on mythology, by the way, the little goat man that plays a flute. That's part of Greek and Roman mythology. This celebrates music. And then, of course, you have a reference over here to the Venus, which is a common painting theme. And then, of course, people making love in the foregrounds. And another reference to music over here. So it's a celebration of life and all of the joys and entertainments that come with it. Another member of the Fauves is André Derain. André Derain also used really bright, vivid colors to express himself. You can see that here with his painting of the London Bridge. Here's the bridge. There's a little boat going underneath it, and then the Thames, as well as the Parliament buildings in the background. So the river is not green and yellow. It's a normal looking river. If you ever go to the Thames, it's blue. Well, actually like a brownish blue, but yeah. The bridge itself, the sky is orange. That's not how it's supposed to be. The sky in London is blue. So once again, Derain has also chosen bright colors to express himself and to create a more interesting composition of something that would normally be shown in a very traditional painting. It was a pretty popular theme to paint images of the Thames. You can also see an expression similar to what Seurat did with his Pointillism dots, especially in the lower left-hand corner. So he's blended together different colors over here, and we have finally the color blue, thanks to the combination of the yellow over here and the green melding in over here. Down in this corner, we have blue, which is a reference to Pointillism. Now, moving on from the Fauves, we're going to talk briefly about Expressionism. Expressionism is a word, this is the third time it's popped up. Expressionism is a very general art term that gets thrown about quite flippantly in the art world. It's just emphasizing inner feelings. It's all about expressing your inner emotions. It's all Expressionism is. There's several different kinds of Expressionism, like Van Gogh's and Gauguin's version. There's also German Expressionism, like Edvard Munch's The Scream, which is all about angst. And there's also another kind of Expressionism that we're about to talk about. Expressionism can be traced as far back to the Baroque period with Delacroix and other artists. It's seen for hundreds of years in the art world just as a way for artists to show their emotions and feelings and how they want to depict things. So the Fauves are an expressionist group. Now we're going to talk about two expressionist groups that hail from Germany. These guys are going to be really important for your final. So there are two German expressionist groups. One of them is called Die Brücke, or the bridge, and the other group is called Der Blue Rider, or the Blue Rider. So both of them are tied to Expressionism in the fact that they like to use art as a form of expressing their emotions, and both of those groups are from Germany. The Fauves are not from Germany. The Bridge and the Blue Rider groups are. So some of the themes that pop up in German Expressionism are a continuation of that angst with sorrow and passion in the human condition. They're also very invested in natural life and spirituality or mysticism. So if you remember The Scream, that's a German expressionist painting that comes a little bit prior to these groups. It was very sorrowful and passionate. You're on the right track. The Bridge group is a group that's led by Ernst Ludwig Kirchner. The entire group is comprised of former architects. Yes, architects turned painter. And all of the members were interested in expressing their emotions, just like Edvard Munch. They incorporated things like Cubism, sculpture, and German Gothic. You remember Gothic architecture, correct? Pointy, very tall, lots of stained glass windows, arches, things like that. So the Bridge group literally wanted to become a bridge with Germany's past Gothic style of art and Germany's present version of Expressionism. So they wanted to be the bridge between those two art styles, the bridge between Gothic and contemporary. They are the bridge. That's why they named themselves the Bridge group. So that's going to be important for you later. So Ernst Ludwig Kirchner is once again the leader. He paints a really well-known painting called Street Berlin, which uses a lot of crazy colors and rough, loose, broad brush strokes. It has a lot of angular forms, pointed forms reminiscent of Gothic architecture. He has made these figures extremely long and pointy to reference the Gothic cathedrals and the points that you would find in that. He's also used a lot of crazy colors and loose brush strokes to represent contemporary art in Germany. So he's trying to bridge the past with the present. So once again, the bridge is about bridging the past with the present. And here's where I have another issue with your textbook, because they lump in Paula Modersohn Becker with the bridge group. The bridge group is just men, former architects, men. Paula Modersohn Becker is from Germany, and she was working under Expressionism, but she is not a member of the bridge group. She is not a man, and she is not a former architect, and they did not include her in anything. Paula Modersohn Becker was working by herself. She did go to art school, and she made a lot of paintings to express how she was feeling emotionally. And we have pretty good records of how she was feeling because she kept a very specific diary that she would write her emotions down in daily. She struggled with fertility for a very long time. Her husband cheated on her several times as well throughout that struggle. Eventually, she became pregnant, which is what she's portraying here as her happiness. So she's celebrating her body and her fertility here because she was able to finally become pregnant. Unfortunately, she does end up having a miscarriage, and yeah, things go downhill from there. But this is when she is in a happy moment of her life, and she is expressing the power of her body and celebrating the fertility of the female form here and trying to express that in painting. Once again, she herself is not a member of the bridge group, but she is a German expressionist. Our second German expressionist group is the Blue Rider group, led by the Russian artist Vasily Kandinsky. So the Blue Rider group is comprised of Russians and Germans who were living in Germany, and the reason why they called themselves the Blue Rider group is because the two main founders, Vasily Kandinsky and Franz Marc, their favorite color was blue, and they really liked horses. So that's why they're called the Blue Rider group. It's nothing like philosophical like the bridge group is. They literally like the color blue and horses, which is kind of cute. So Vasily Kandinsky, we're going to look at his Blue Mountain. Another common trait with the Blue Rider group is they use the color blue a lot. I don't know, maybe because they're named after it, and maybe because it's their favorite color. So you see, once again, a continuation here of using really bold, bright colors inspired by Fauvism and interesting brushstrokes. And you can see a little bit of an inspiration with Pointalism here too. And of course, because we're the Blue Rider group, not only did we include a blue mountain, but we also included horses with riders, because we're the Blue Riders. I think it's cute. So like I said, Vasily Kandinsky is the leader of the group. He eventually is going to shift to abstract art or non-representational abstract art by 1910. And the group itself doesn't last very long at all because World War I happens and a lot of the members are enlisted into it and end up dying in it. So the group only lasts a couple of years. So Vasily Kandinsky later on with his art from 1910. Actually, let's take a little side trip. There's another member of the Blue Rider group, which is really awesome. And he's not mentioned at all in this presentation. I thought that this is my usual presentation, but I'm realizing as I'm going through this that this is not my usual presentation, but that's fine. So Franz Marc is the co-founder of the Blue Rider Group. Franz Marc is a German artist, and he does unfortunately die in World War I. But he is like the quintessential member of the Blue Rider Group. He paints very large blue horses. That's what he's well known for in his paintings. So really cute, pretty. Once again, loose brush strokes, bold color choices. And very collectible pieces now too, because there's not very many of them since he did die. So, sorry for that side trip, but I couldn't talk about the Blue Riders and not talk about Franz Marc and his blue horses. So Vasily Kandinsky is the leader of the Blue Rider Group, and he ends up shifting to abstract art in 1910 because he wants to convince people that a picture does not, or a painting doesn't have to be of a subject. It can be of non-representational things. He himself is the artist that listens to music and paints what he hears. Music can't be seen, it's heard, but he tries to illustrate it what he thinks it looks like or express how he feels that music would appear. So he titles a lot of his artworks after musical pieces, such as composition 4. Composition is a word that you would come across in a musical class, or you might have come across in music class. So this is, he would listen to the music and he would try to illustrate what he was hearing using colors and shapes and lines. So extremely abstract and very non-representational. So he does take quite a departure from the Blue Rider Group after its disbandment. No more blue horses. Following our German expressionist groups comes the invention of Cubism. Cubism is once again heavily inspired by Paul Cézanne. You remember his Mount Saint Victoire painting, which used really loose brush strokes. And it's invented by two guys. One guy usually gets all the credit, but they were working together. They were literally working together on it to come up with it. And those two guys are Pablo Picasso and George Brucke. They're both working in Spain on it together. Both of them frequented Paul Cézanne's hometown to try and paint the same things he painted because they were literally obsessed with the guy. And they were also trying to develop Cubism at the same time together. Cubism is all about trying to show things in cube-like formats. So they're not only inspired with Paul Cézanne, but they're also heavily inspired by African sculpture. At this period in history, museums are starting to exhibit artifacts from around the world, including African masks from Africa that are being imported back to museums. And artists are frequenting these museums and checking out these pieces from around the world and gaining inspiration from them, which you can easily see in Picasso's Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, which is literally a painting of prostitutes. But you can see it's very flat. Cubism is extremely flat, trying to use geometric shapes to portray objects and images, making them look as flat as possible. That's what Cubism is about. Early Cubism uses colors. Later on, Cubism will transform into a monochromatic style. But here you can see the African masks were used as inspiration, like literally looks like you just copied them from a museum sketch for the ladies' faces here. And this is an example of one of the masks that he would have looked at to study. And another one. So Picasso's Les Demoiselles d'Avignon is Cubism. Cubism is like you're trying to restructure the entire image, meaning you're trying to fracture the pieces and show them with geometric forms. Like I said, he's trying to overturn any sense of traditional Western art. We've already overturned color usage and brushstrokes. Why not throw away shapes too? Another example of Cubism, this is, once again, Paul Cézanne is like the father of Cubism, although Picasso and Brucke invent it. So here is a painting by Paul Cézanne of his hometown, and this is Brucke's copy of that. So Brucke went to Cézanne's hometown, the same location that Cézanne was sitting at, and made this. Very different, same thing. So this is like when Cubism really found its spot, is around this time period, 1908, with Brucke and his houses at La Estique. So these are all houses. They look like cardboard boxes, but they're houses. They're these houses, actually. Going up the side of the hill, and you can see the trees up there. Once again, early Cubism uses colors. Later on, Cubism will turn into monochromatic painting, which you see here. So the point of Cubism ends up evolving to Brucke and Picasso trying to show all of the sides or viewpoints of the object at the same time. So imagine you had a cube and you disassembled it to your lovely little squares. It ends up making like what, a cross shape kind of thing. That would be what they would paint, is the disassembled version. So they end up piling up the shapes and making the spaces very ambiguous. It's very hard to read this eventual Cubism that's created by Brucke and Picasso. There's no color used in it. They throw away all emotions, so that popular Expressionism that was worked so hard on by the Fauves and the German Expressionists no longer exists in Cubism. Literally, it's just multiple perspectives of the same object shown at the same time is all that Cubism is. So we're going to look at Brucke's The Portuguese, which is actually a portrait of a man sitting at a table strumming a guitar. This is a portrait of a man, which you can kind of make it out. Here's his nose. You can see his guitar there. So once again, no color. And once again, Cubism would be like if I were to take this candle and I were to try and, well, I can't get the lid on for some reason. Try and paint the top of it, the sides of it, and the bottom of it, all flat in a two-dimensional format at the same time. When you're looking at an object, you don't usually see all of the sides at once. You would have to move around it and flip it over. What Brucke and Picasso would do would try to illustrate all of the things, even the things that you don't see, all at once. And that is Cubism. So it's very odd, but also kind of genius at the same time. Synthetic Cubism is a modified version of analytical Cubism. Analytical Cubism is this, the very monochromatic advanced Cubism that ends up being created by Brucke and Picasso. So once again, this is early Cubism. Eventually it evolves into this analytical Cubism, which is analyzing all of the sides of an object at the same time and trying to portray them all. Synthetic Cubism is a modified, easier to understand version of that. It's like they kind of backtracked back to the beginning versions of Cubism. It uses colors, textures, patterns. They make collages, sculptures, and things like that using the same idea of Cubism. And you can see a great example of a collage here by Picasso using the same ideas of analytical Cubism, but paring them down quite a bit more. So here you see your guitar or technically this one's a violin. So you see the violin, it's kind of been broken down and deconstructed into pieces for us here. Here is a glass, a little wine goblet, some fruit, and journalism articles. So basically someone sitting at a table with a musical instrument, some food and a drink. Here's another example of synthetic cubism and another guitar. You're seeing a theme with guitars with cubism. So we have the guitar. It's been shown to us in different pieces and different layers. This is literally cardboard and construction paper. Brucke pretty much sticks with your analytical cubism. Picasso moves on from analytical into synthetic, and then he goes through his blue period and his rose period and all those other periods. So he evolves. Now we are moving on towards abstraction, which you can kind of already see abstraction here, but now we're going to fully go abstract with our sculpture, thanks to Constantin Brancusi. Constantin Brancusi is actually trained by Rodin, the guy that does the thinker statue that we just looked at in the last section. But he breaks out of Rodin's teachings and decides to do his own thing, which is a common theme with this section. Everyone doing their own daggone thing. So here we see an early example of Brancusi's work. It's very similar to Rodin's sculptures and very similar to Michelangelo's Awakening Slaves. They look like they're kind of unfinished marble sculptures that are almost out of the marble, but not quite. Brancusi will later on evolve to, well, not even really that much later. This one's 1908, this one's 1909. Evolve into a slightly more abstract version. This is very heavily influenced by the cycladic figures that would have been exhibited in multicultural art museums. You can kind of see them here. So here is a cycladic figure. This is from ancient Greece, like really, really ancient Greece, 2700 to 2300 BCE. He saw this in a museum, was inspired by it, and made this. You can really see the close resemblance. And then later on, a couple years after that, he makes this one. This is Newborn, very abstract. It's newborn in a couple of ways. Anyone want to tell me what they think this looks like?
Egg.
Yeah, it looks like a hard-boiled egg. So that's why it's called newborn, actually. So newborns come from eggs in the ovum. Also, this looks like a hard-boiled egg, which is a newborn chicken. Maybe it's just because I eat a hard-boiled egg every day and it makes me think like it's time for breakfast. So Constantin Brancusi does become very inspired by those cycladic figures, and he becomes more and more abstract with his artworks as time continues on. Eventually, he becomes extremely abstract with his art, and he creates things like Bird in Space using highly reflective bronze, which has a bit of a weightless quality to it. This also has a bit of a double entendre to it, kind of like the newborn one. Anyone want to take a guess at what they think this looks like?
Like a feather or a pen.
A feather? I think someone said feather.
Like a pen and quill like thing.
A feather, yeah. So one of the things it looks like is a feather. Another thing it looks like, if you're familiar with your time, what is invented in this time period that might have to do with flight?
Oh, the brothers.
Yeah, yeah. So this not only represents a feather, but also a propeller. So there's two reasons why this is titled Bird in Space. It's literally representing a bird's feather, as well as the first early planes that used propellers that looked similar to this as well. So flying, both of them have to do with flying. He used bronze. Bronze is a very lightweight metal to sculpt with, especially in comparison to marble, which is more common for him to have used in the past to kind of portray flight. He's also made this extremely polished and reflective to make it look as modern as possible, because planes are a modern invention. And now we're going to take a slight detour to see what's happening in America. Last time we were in America, they were doing landscape paintings and landscape photography. Now we are on to the early 1900s, and in America we are still doing photography, but thanks to Alfred Stieglitz, it has become an accepted form of art. There's no longer a competition between painters and photographers. They are both accepted as forms of art in their own right. We've already looked at the steerage. This is the one in which he used the actual ship's construction to separate the upper class from the lower class as they were arriving into immigration in New York. Alfred Stieglitz is extremely influential in getting photography accepted as an art form. He's also influential in the fact that he had his own magazine, his own gallery, both of which showcased European artists in America. So people like Brancusi, which are quite a bit different from those landscape painters like Thomas Cole and the Oxbow, who were still really popular in America by this time. Americans were very behind on the times when it comes to art. Keep that in mind. We were quite stubborn. We wanted to keep doing our landscape paintings for a very long time. We were very proud of them. So these abstract, modern looking things, we thought were stupid and garish, and we did not appreciate them. In fact, some people still don't. It's thanks to Alfred Stieglitz that they became a bit more like widespread as far as people knowing them or recognizing them, thanks to his gallery and his magazine that he published. He also brought to the United States something called the Armory Show in 1913. The Armory Show showcased all of the most influential European artists at the time in New York and Chicago. It was the first opportunity for Americans to see modern art, which was a really big deal. And it ended up inspiring a lot of American artists in turn. His wife, Georgia O'Keeffe, probably more famous than he is. She did really blown up images or paintings of flowers. She's also well known for her landscape painting. She obviously was also inspired by European artists like the Fauves and the Impressionists and the Expressionists, which you can see in that evening star. This is actually a painting of the Texas Panhandle. She loved to come to Texas and New Mexico because of the large landscapes and the vast land here. She ended up permanently moving to Taos, New Mexico. So you can see the bright, bold color usage here. Now, as far as architecture in America, the main architect was Frank Lloyd Wright. In Europe, the main architect was, the main architectural style was the International style, which is all about creating boxes with lots of windows, so like skyscrapers. In America, we were doing Prairie House style. Prairie House style, it's very flat. Think of like a one-story long house, and that's pretty much a Prairie House style. Frank Lloyd Wright was the top, and probably still is, the most well-known architect that America has produced. Prior to him, the most affluent architectural style for a home in America was the Victorian style house. He helped to modernize that to this. He also invented the cantilever roof, which extends out past the house to give you like a porch area. And we've talked about this before. So this was created in 1909, prior to the Model T. And now we're going to go back to Europe and end with the Futurists. I love the Futurists. They're really funny. So the Futurists are a group of artists exhibiting and working together in Italy. It's the first time we've talked about Italy in this class, I do believe, beyond the Renaissance. It's been a long time since we've talked about Italian art. So the Italian Futurists were very invested in technology, particularly trains, planes, and automobiles. And they liked to showcase the speed and motion of all of those new inventions in their artwork. But they did it using Cubist techniques. So you remember Cubism shows everything all at once. Yeah, that's what the Futurists did too, but they were not trying to show all of the sides of things at once. They were trying to show all of the motions of things at once. So you're going to understand what that means a little bit better in a second. Actually, I don't think it's in here. It might be. So a great example of that is Giacomo Balla, who is an Italian futurist. He's one of the main Italian futurists. His abstract speed, the car has passed. This was his first experience of riding in a car. The car's top speed was 35 miles per hour. That was really fast to him. And he wanted to illustrate what he saw looking out the window. If you've ever ridden in a car, you might notice that the landscape kind of flies by quickly, although 35 miles per hour is not that fast. So he was trying to illustrate what the landscape looked like to him as he was looking out the car window. So Futurism is all about motion and dynamism and showing motion because they liked speed. It's not in here. I do want to show it though, because this is like the quintessential example of the easiest way to understand Futurism right here. Let me share that for you guys. Let's see if I can get that a little bit bigger for us. Here we see another piece by Balla. This is Dynamisms of a Dog on a Leash. So what they tried to do in Futurism is, can you guys see this? Because it's showing me that you can't. I'll reshare.
No.
Yeah, I didn't think so. It's like acting weird.
Yeah, not really.
Teams has been interesting today. So what they're trying to do is show motion, all of the motions at once. So here you can see all of the different wags of that dog's tail and all of the motions that the dog's wagging tail went through. Same with the legs of the dog. It's showing all of the steps at once. Same with the leash and the woman's dress at the bottom. So it's trying to show all of the motion and movement at one time. Just like Cubism tried to show all of the sides of things at one time. Just instead of showing all of the sides of things, they're trying to show all of the motion. And that is how Futurism works. And the most well-known sculpture from the futurist group is by Umberto Boccioni. Boccioni creates a sculpture titled Unique Forms of Continuity in Space. There are tons of copies of this sculpture. It is a bronze cast, so it's pretty easy to make copies of it. But it's trying to show a man walking into the future. And you can see that here. because the futurists are very obsessed with technology and movement and future. So it's trying to show a man walking into the future and forcing his way into the future. Now, another artist that was interested in motion but is not a futurist because he is not Italian is Marcel Duchamp. Marcel Duchamp was working on his own independently of the futurists. He didn't know what they were doing. He was working in another country at the same time. And he creates something using stroboscopic photography. Stroboscopic photography is when you set your camera to start taking continuous images for a set amount of time. So let's say you get your camera and you have it set for 30 seconds and it's going to continually take shots nonstop for 30 seconds. That's what he did to create Nude Descending a Staircase. How this worked is he took all of those pictures of a woman walking down the staircase, and then he overlaid all of those photographs, leaving them slightly transparent. And he made this painting. So this is literally a painting of that photography overlaid on top of each other. He just copied it. This was exhibited at the 1913 Armory show that was created by Alfred Stieglitz in New York and Chicago. It was not well accepted. In fact, this one ended up making the newspaper. So it does show a lot of movement. It shows the woman's body walking down the staircase and all of the movements required to walk down the staircase at once. The president at the time, quote unquote, said the painting was an explosion in a shingle factory. That is what the United States president said of this at the time. But once again, it's just a great example of motion in painting and trying to illustrate motion in painting in a very interesting way, taking, like I said, influence from Cubism. Another artist that was interested in portraying motion that was working independently is Sonia Delaunay-Turk. Sonia Delaunay-Turk is most well known for her fashion designs. She made affordable fashion for the masses, but she also painted. Her husband was a well-known op artist, so optical illusion artist. So that's the kind of art that if you stare at it long enough, it looks like it's moving. That's what he did. She was also very interested in painting things that looked like they were moving, but in a different way, more along the lines of Duchamp. And we're going to look at her La Belle Bruyère, which is her interpretation of couples dancing on a dance floor. And here is that painting. So this is a very obviously abstract interpretation of couples dancing. It always, to me, kind of looks like penguins, but that's just the men in their tuxedos and then the women and the man and the woman, and they're just twirling around. So that's her interpretation of how she wanted to show motion in painting. And I always find it interesting. It's done on mattress ticking, so it's painted on a fabric, and she herself is a fashion designer first and foremost, so that's probably why. So for this section, we covered art from the early 1900s all the way up until World War I. Next, there were a lot of art movements from that time, obviously. Next week, we're going to cover art from World War I and World War II. So some interesting stuff that is going to come up. It's going to mostly be reactions to people that are confused and disturbed by those world wars that are happening. So we're going to see some interesting artwork come out of that. But I managed to finish early. I'm surprised. Go me. Are there any questions about Futurism, Cubism, any of the isms that we've talked about? Big ones that you're going to want to remember are Fauves, the Fauve artists, your two German expressionist groups, the De Brucke and Der Blue Rider. You're also going to want to know what Picasso was inspired by and what the futurists are interested in for this section. I think I covered everything. Yeah, I did. I have gone over everything so far from these chapters that will be on your test. Next week, we'll keep going through those chapters that are going to be on your final exam. I would recommend that you go ahead and start researching which gallery you'd like to attend for your gallery review. Once again, if you're wanting to do an online gallery, email me and I will send you a list of some shows that would work out for you if you wanted to do a virtual one. I don't like you guys finding those on your own because half the time you find random stuff. Like last time I had a student write about the British Museum of Art. Do you understand how many things are in the British Museum of Art? There's thousands of things in there. It did not go well. So I don't want you guys to make that same mistake. So reach out to me if you want to do a virtual exhibition so that that doesn't end up being you. And of course, if you want my help with that, don't wait. Same with if you want me to proofread your art, or your art, it is your artwork, your writing, reach out to me and let me know, and I can get to that. If you wait too long, I won't have time because I'm going to probably have like a ton of people asking me to do it last minute. And I don't know how many I'm going to get through because there's like 170 of you guys working on this all at the same time. So yay me. And if you think of any questions, email me, ask me, and I will answer them promptly. And for those of you that aren't aware, there was a artist talk today hosted by UTPB, and they're doing another one tomorrow at 11. If you're interested, that is on Canvas. I do need to add the meeting code because Brucke realized that I forgot it. And Brucke realized I didn't even realize that I forgot it. So good job, Brucke. And hopefully they'll have sound on it today because he said there wasn't sound, and hopefully I'll get to go. But it's going to be an artist showing us how to make prints and discussing their artworks with us. So if you're interested in printmaking, that would be a really good talk to attend. But other than that, I wish you all a wonderful weekend. And I will see you guys next week. Oh, and we do have class the week of Thanksgiving. It's going to be a super short night, just a super, super short night. But there is class that Tuesday night.
Solid.
Yeah, guys.
All right. Have a nice day.
You too.
Good night. Thank you.
Here.
Good night.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.